And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Greetings, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Thursday, November 30th. This is for the weather coming up here Friday into Saturday. We have a few different low pressure systems. There's going to be one out in the Gulf and another one quickly come up here late in the weekend on Sunday. And then back to the west, there are a couple areas of low pressure in the lower Bering Sea. And a stronger low is going to lift out of the North Pacific on Monday and Tuesday and impact much of the Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle. But that's further down the road. But in the shorter term, we are going to have a couple of low pressure systems mainly impacting areas of the Panhandle over the weekend, and then a couple of lows back out here toward the lower Bering. There's even the potential of enough instability. There could be some rumbles of thunder across areas of the eastern Aleutians up into the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula Friday morning. We also have IFR conditions expected around Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island into the southwestern Gulf. By the time we get into Friday afternoon, we'll see the IFR conditions expand a little bit here in the western Gulf, but also still could be embedded rumble of thunder in the scattered showers that will be located here along and just off of the Panhandle coast. Much of the interior Friday will see VFR conditions, a little area of MVFR coming up through the middle Yukon Valley, west side of the Brooks Range. And then on Saturday morning, we still have that area of IFR conditions persisting along the southwestern Gulf back toward the lower Cook Inlet. And then when we look way out to the west, there could be a rumble of thunder in the western Aleutians out there toward Kiska and Shemya. By the time we get into Saturday afternoon, still a broad area of MVFR with maybe a little IFR over toward Hyder or just east there of Ketchikan. And along the southwest coast, MVFR conditions extending up through the Bering Strait along the North Slope Arctic coast. Again, there could be an isolated rumble of thunder south of the central Aleutians Saturday afternoon with a pocket of IFR in that location as well. Quick check of the passes coming up on Friday. Anatuvik Pass, VFR conditions there in the Brooks Range. Adigan Pass also VFR as we drop southwestward toward the west arm of the Alaska Range. Lake Clark and Merrill start out with MVFR conditions early Friday, giving way to VFR conditions. Same thing, Rainy Pass will have some MVFR conditions early in the day, giving way to VFR. And the central Alaska Range eastward to the Alcan border will see VFR conditions at Windy, Isabel, and Mentasta Passes on Friday. Further south across the Copper River Basin, we do anticipate rather widespread VFR conditions, including Tanita Pass. And then as we get down toward Prince William Sound, we'll see some MVFR conditions at Portage Pass in the morning, giving way to VFR. And then finally in the far north end of the Panhandle at Chilkoot and White Passes, we anticipate VFR conditions there throughout the day on Friday. Looking at the freezing levels at the surface, the freezing line Friday morning will run along the Kamchatka coastline to just south of St. Matthew, down across Bristol Bay, northern half of the Alaska Peninsula, on up toward the entrance of Cook Inlet, and then along the Gulf Coast into the inner channels of the Panhandle. Overall, the air mass has cooled quite a bit. Freezing levels aloft, there's a little pocket of freezing levels aloft around or just over 2,000 feet from around Kaktovik to the entrance of the Mackenzie River. And then further south, we see that the 2,000 foot freezing level aloft is well south of the Aleutians as well as the Alaska Peninsula, nudging up into the lower southeastern Gulf to up around Craig and just north of Haida Gwaii. The greatest threat for some icing will be along areas of the Gulf. There could be some isolated moderate icing, perhaps more so in the southern Panhandle around Metlakatla on over toward Craig, above 4,000 feet. Pockets of icing in the western central interior, south of the Brooks Range, above 4,000 feet. And then an area across the lower Bering Sea, there could be some pockets of moderate icing above 4,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet. We have a jet core in excess of 130 to 140 knots. Well south of the Gulf in the North Pacific and south of the Alaska Peninsula. That has been the dominant band of winds in the upper levels there at 30,000 feet. At 9,000 millibars, or 9,000 feet, or roughly 700 millibars, We see that mid-level winds generally 40 to in excess of 60, in some cases near 70 knots there to the west of Washington State and Vancouver. We do have, with a low circulation, some winds pulling back into the northern Gulf, upwards of 30, 35 knots, and then a belt of southerly winds to 40 knots there in the middle Yukon Valley, bringing it down to 3,000 feet. Low circulation there in the Gulf. We do have some stronger winds on the north side of that in the northern Gulf, 40 to 45 knots. South of there, 45 to as high as 60 knot winds, but those will remain generally south of the Gulf and also the Panhandle. And then back to the west, we have another low circulation with some 40 to 50 knot winds across the southwestern portion of the Bering Sea, and then a broad belt of 40 to 50 knot winds across the western and central Aleutians. And this all translates to the greatest threat for some turbulence there in the southern parts of the Panhandle. There could be some moderate turbulence, surface to 6,000 feet. We have an area out along the Aleutian chain, surface to 3,000 feet, moderate turbulence likely. And then also a pocket up here through the Bering Strait into especially north side of St. Lawrence Island, surface to 3,000 feet.